And let me just check the settings.
Is it still super hot up there?
There was quite an intense heat wave. It was broken once or twice by some rain, but it has been rough. What's it like down there?
This week's been nice, actually. We've had a little bit of rain here and there, surprising rain. But today, Cape Town's doing this weird thing where there's this haze that's coming and sitting over the city that I've lived here almost my whole life, and I've never seen so many days of this crazy haze. At first, I thought it was smoke, but there's no fires. I think it's just some sort of fog that's come in. So that side, bright and beautiful. That side, kind of gloomy, actually.
Okay.
For what it's worth.
Yeah, it's always nice to imagine what's happening in Cape Town. Let's jump right in. So, I mean, we'll sort of, some stragglers will be joining as we carry on, I'm sure. Welcome to all the third year students. The 5 major subjects that are represented, and I have said this to Sean, is film and television, screen acting, sound design, screenwriting, and production design. So kind of the live action elements.
Cool.
And we're very excited and honored to have Sean Drummond addressing us today or chatting with us. So please do make use of the opportunity, all. I passed on the 5 original questions that were dropped in the classroom. Passed them on to Sean already, so I'm sure you'll have something to say about them. But if at any point you have a question as we're going, drop a question somewhere directly in the chat, or you feel free to interrupt us with your microphone, although that's slightly less elegant. But do type some questions in the chat, and we have an hour and a half, 2 hours. We'll see how long we go to pick Sean's brain and his wealth of knowledge. So please do use the opportunity. So without further ado, that was me wasting 2 minutes to make sure we get as many people in the session as possible.
Cool.
I think you can introduce yourself. A lot of the Open Window community knows you already because of the screening that you came and did last year.
Okay.
Also because of the epic graduation speech that you did earlier this year. So there might be a couple of people here who have never seen you or heard your voice, but I actually doubt it. But please do tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into further chats.
Cool, I will. I think because I think this prefaces the whole thing, is I'll talk a bit about myself and a little bit about how I got started, and because I think I've got the questions and I'll do my best to answer them. But also, I don't personally. I'm not big on the addressing, so I didn't prepare a checklist of like 101 how to enter the industry, but I prefer conversations and keeping it kind of natural. So I think, are you going to keep an eye on the chat, or should I keep an eye on the chat?
Yeah, I will assist you. There's a couple of lecturers in here that will help us as well, but
okay, cool.
We can both just keep an eye on it. I also like to keep it natural, not really wearing pants, that kind of thing.
What are pants? I forgot what pants are about 3 months ago. Okay. So I'm Sean Drummond. I'm a writer and producer. I have a company called BFAT Motel Film Company. We're based in Cape Town. Although Michael, my partner in the company, is actually in LA. He's been in LA for a couple of years. His movie Love and Monsters just came out last Friday, actually. On Amazon Prime. It's his first Paramount film, first LA film. So it's a Paramount film. It's really good. He had a terrible time with the producers on it. It was a real trial by fire in Hollywood. I won't tell you who they are, but if you watch the movie, you'll see. And they sort of didn't know what to do with the movie, but it's really good. And I had a feeling it was going to break out and take everybody by surprise, and it has. The reviews are amazing. So check out Love and Monsters if you. I think it's coming to Netflix next week in South Africa, or a couple of weeks around. Anyway, so we together run a company called BFAT Motel. He's a director primarily, and I'm a writer and producer. Our most biggest project for sure is Five Fingers for Marseille, which some of you, I guess, would have seen at the screening last year, or may have just seen when it was out, or it's still on Showmax, and still doing festivals, and actually doing drive-ins and stuff over the thanks Thorin. During the lockdown, the drive-ins that are popping up are quite fun. So we're doing some drive-in screenings in Cape Town, and I don't know, maybe we'll have to organize something for Joburg and Pretoria. We did Apocalypse Now, the short film, and that's something we've got in development now as a feature, which is freely available on YouTube. And that is I think we like to play in a genre space, and going all the way back to the very beginning of how we got started. And I'll warn you in advance that I just ramble and talk, so I'm sorry. Like, feel free to wave frantically if I'm going too far off whatever topic I'm trying to be on at that time. But I studied screenwriting at UCT, University of Cape Town, and while I was there, I linked up with Michael as a director who was at City Varsity, Cape Town. And together we sort of formed a creative collective, which was myself as a writer, Mike as a director, and then we had Sean Harley-Lee as a DP, Dan Mitchell as an editor, James Mathers as a composer, Mornay Marais as a sound designer, Dylan Valley as a documentary maker, and a couple other people. But really that core group of people, we sort of gravitated toward each other because we really loved each other's work and respected each other. We sort of had shared goals about the sorts of films we wanted to do, and we all had a bit of a genre sensibility, and we weren't really seeing genre films in South Africa at the time. And so we were like, well, let's just like work together, you know. And sort of from our sort of 2004, which would have been all of our second or third years, I forget, we consistently started working together, making short films. And then by the time it got to 2006, we were all graduating. We sort of knew we had a good thing going on, and we knew that it was, we sort of knew that we wanted to enter into the industry and make a splash. So we started BFAT Motel as a company. We started as a collective in that final year and started as a company the year we graduated, the year after we graduated. And we graduated with big dreams, with this one big project that we'd worked super hard to do. And we had this, you know, you go out with a big vision. We had this vision. We were going to sort of land and make this film and change the fabric of South African film, change the landscape. And it was this very, very big, very dark, supernatural thriller based on Greek mythology and post-apocalyptic world. And it was huge. It was like there was no way we were ever going to be able to make something that big, being sort of like 22, 23 years old. But we went out anyway, and we'd shot a proof of concept trailer, which back then people weren't really doing, but we did it because we felt like it was a smart thing to do. And so instead of Mike, instead of his third year film project at City Varsity, we just shot a trailer. And when they found out that's what we were doing, they all said, "Oh my God, like, you can't do that. We're going to fail you because you haven't shot a film." And then they saw it, and it was really good. And so they were like, "Oh, okay." And then he won the class prize for it or something like that. But so we launched ourselves with sort of boundless ambition. And I think probably we were aiming a lot further than our capabilities were at the time, but because we were, I think because we had each other to support us along the way, we sort of went like, why not? Let's just go for it. And I think it's very important sort of just like drop one piece of advice now is the relationships you guys are making are the relationships that will last into the industry, you know, and that's true of us, true of Mysore, it's true of most creative collaborations. People get together, be it like the A-list directors in the world, wherever they are. A lot of them started out with actors or DPs or writers or collaborators, whatever it is, and those relationships stay consistent even into their 70s. If you look at like Spielberg, he's still working with the same producers, the same crews, the same actors often. And that's a man who's like started his career in his 20s and is now in his 70s, I think. You know, like that's it's the power of friendship, but it's the power of collaboration, you know, because film is the most collaborative art form that there is. There's no such thing as a one-man band in the film industry. It just doesn't exist, you know, like the industry sort of portrays itself, I think a lot of the time, but the marketing around films is built around the singular vision of the director or the new film by Quentin Tarantino, but it's the result of a collaboration of people working at every level on those films, from the producer shepherding the whole thing to the to the director whose vision has to steer the ship, of course, but then every single collaborator in key position is important, be it the DP, the costume designer, production designer, the editor, you know, all the way down to the grip or who's the gaffer, who's lighting the thing. Everybody has to be excelling at the top of their game and has to be working towards the same vision. And so those collaborations start now, And so what was great about what we had was we had this creative shorthand. We all had this very very singular vision about what we wanted to do. We went out, we started meeting producers. We would go out and we would meet everybody who would meet us. So we would go and take meetings here, take meetings there. Some of them were great, and we got some really great advice. I think some of it I probably talked about in the graduation speech, where there's a producer who sort of said to us, like, I love what you guys are doing, but you got to start small. Like this project, this massive, like $10 million project is like, nobody's going to give you the money to do that. And you can't do that. Like, you can't handle that. You think you can, but you can't. Making films is hard. Start small. We were like, cool, bro. Okay, bye. And we eventually linked up with two producers who loved the project, took it on, and sort of started mentoring us in just how to get a film off the ground. And so we learned a lot of the financials and the legals and all of that about putting projects together. Sort of real deep immersion, learning that we wouldn't have got anywhere else. It's a sort of learning you don't get in college. No college teaches the ins and outs of the fine-tuned details of trying to put those things together. And also because no two projects are the same, a lot of the time you only really figure that stuff out on the fly. So it was great for us. Sorry, I'm not watching the comments come in real time, but I can see they are sort of popping in. I'll check them out now.
Yeah, if there's a pertinent question, I'll make sure we don't miss it.
Okay, cool.
Just to say, I read something the other day about, like, every artist needs a measure of kind of overconfidence. Like, you need to almost believe in yourself and your ability more than what is realistic to keep pushing forward. And it's this weird space between being, I guess, like, so into yourself and into your ego and into the sort of creative energy that you have, and being, what would it be, like, indulgent in, like, what you think you can do. But you do need to have this almost this, like, blind self-belief to just keep backing yourself and keep getting up from every disappointing encounter where somehow, there's a challenge that makes you feel like, okay, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy to keep pursuing this weird artistic vision that I have, and that's, I mean, like you're saying, that college does prepare you for that in some way. Like, sometimes you swing and miss, like, you try something and it's tough, and your lecturers crit you, and you're like, yes, see, maybe I should try, flipping burgers, or like, and then, but the people who really do well, that's another lovely thing that we've been speaking about in professional practice, is success stories. You often, like, you're like, yes, this person is just nailing it. Like, one project after another is just a super successful thing. But what you usually don't get to see is the 70 swings where they missed, and like on the 71st swing, they just, like, nailed it out of the park. But they don't publicize the 70 misses because, I did read a really interesting CV of failures the other day by this guy who said we should be public about our failures, and, like, there's something to learn. So he made a whole CV of, like, every time he'd applied for a grant and didn't get it, every time he tried to do something and someone dissed him, and it's like really humbling reading. It's such a weird thing to put in the public space, because all of social media is designed, for example, to just be this crazy highlights reel of how successful everyone is, So it's lovely always, like, to meet someone like you, to hear the stories. Like, I love the story of Five Fingers for Marseille, and how it took a decade, and how many like crazy, like almost like that actor being sick on the set and all that shit. Like, it's insane. And then it all gets done because there is some weird inner drive. Like, we're gonna make this film no matter how many dogs are barking. Okay, sorry, I'm interrupting. Please carry on, Sean.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, this is sort of where the story is going. Is that this is all happening like 2007, 2008, and the boundless ambition and all of that is definitely the thing that carries you through. And that, I think there has to be a measure of self-belief. I don't think I guess it manifests in different ways. You can have sort of Kanye West levels of megalomania, but you also can't deny Kanye West has done some pretty amazing shit, And I think there is somewhere in between the balance between the confidence to go, I'm just going to go out and do it, compared to someone who like is afraid to ever take that one step, you know. And a lot of the people who take the step fail, sure. And you don't hear about those people. You hear about the people with success stories, but you're never going to know if you don't take that first step, and you're never going to succeed unless you keep taking that step over and over again. So that project we were trying to get made fell apart because obviously it was like way too big, and the producers didn't really, the time they sort of, I think, didn't really know what they were trying to do with the project either, and so eventually it fell apart. And so we learned out of that, I think, how to scale down a little bit. And we also learned, geez, you know, like if we really want to do this right, we've got to do it ourselves to a degree. So we regrouped, and with the new skills that we'd taken out of those relationships and keeping those relationships with those producers relatively good, we went out and we started developing a couple other projects, and we would apply for finance here and apply to the NFA for money there. And a lot of those, most of those applications were rejected at the time because we were still, you know, learning how to put those applications in. And we were still meeting producers, and every now and again a producer would come and try and like shepherd us into a project. And we would do like MTV jobs on the side, and some pretty fun branded content and little commercials and music videos. But what we really wanted to do was like make narrative work. And we made a film called Sweetheart, which was a half-an-hour black and white science fiction film in this time. And that was something we'd sort of taken all the money we'd made as a company, we just put it all into that, and we said, okay, this is like, because we're working towards this, like we're not really earning like salaries or anything now, but let's use this money in a practical way. And so we made a short film that did some festivals and got a little bit of buzz around it, and that was cool.
That's actually a question I just typed for you, is how did you pay your monthly bills during this time that you were trying to finance the feature film? Like,
we lived sparsely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the real, you know, like, so you mentioned you did a little bit of corporate work, a little bit of commercial work.
Yeah.
You did a short, you try to build some hype around yourselves as a production company.
Yeah.
But that would be something that, you know, that our students are wondering about. Like, if I'm going to pursue this vision, let's say, of making feature films, or of making a series for Netflix or whatever, everyone, you know, a nature documentary series, like whatever the dream is, I probably won't just step right into the dream. So how do I, in February 2021, if I'm living on my own, like, you know, is there this thing of like, you can be a wedding videographer on the weekends if people are allowed to get married again, and then like, pay the bills with that, and then, you know, sort of save up for the big passion project later, or what?
I think so. I mean, I think the path is long, and that's the lesson we learned as we went. You know, like there was no straight, like, overnight path to success, and so it took us a long time. And we were doing corporate videos, and we were doing, like, piecing together little bits here and there. And I, as a writer, was writing a bit on the side and earning very little money for each thing that I was writing. But at least it was, you know, like, just trying to eke by. And, you know, sort of, it's a thing about going, if we don't take a risk on this now, I mean, the number of times my bank account hit zero and I would like be eating like beans out of a tin for real is, you know, at the time you sort of go, this sucks, but I sure as hell hope it's going to turn around and be worth it. And, you know, it was, finally. But people crew, you know, a lot of people crew. I think it also depends what you do. So for some jobs, it's easier to crew. If you're writing and directing, I think it's relatively hard. And if you're producing, if you're trying to produce your own project, it's especially hard because you're trying to, like, literally you're putting all the time and trying to get these things off the ground. Interesting story about wedding videos. I was I was looking at a project this week, which was by some young filmmakers, probably in a similar sort of boat, young filmmakers, I think, from like the Northwest or really off the beaten track, just trying to get their first films off the ground. And they shot their first film, which I don't think it was a feature. They said it was a feature, but I don't think it was a feature. I haven't seen the actual film. But they filmed a wedding. They'd gone out and they'd like been hired to film a wedding, and then I guess they got permission to use the footage from the wedding as like for their own purposes, and they shot narrative stuff around that. So they actually shot a wedding and made a film out of it together. So I think whatever path, you know, like not everybody's path is the same. Some people join companies, they work in production, they assist producers, they assist directors just to get in the space. I think that was actually one of the questions that somebody sent through was about how you just how do you reach producers without having connections in the industry? Well, you sort of can, but you can't. You can cold call them or mail them. But generally, I think producers have so much of their own stuff going on. They're not generally, some are looking for projects, but they're generally not looking for like cold calls and things really out of nowhere. There has to be some sort of a, if not a reference, there's got to be some reason to put you on their radar, you know. Go out and make a good short yourself. Try and do something to show them and go, this is what I'm trying to do, you know. Put time into like writing that script yourself. Get it to a point where you think it's really good. Do labs. Go like apply to Durban to the talents lab there. Go to markets. Put yourselves in spaces where there's networking that's organic. Because I would say if you go to like let's say you go to Durban Film Mart, for example, or like Joburg Film Festival or something that's closer to home, and they have networking events or even like roundtable meetings, and you can put yourself at a table with someone who is potentially going to enable you to make a project, or a producer who can go, I love this, like let's develop it together. It's a much more organic setting, and that's somewhere where they're primed to be trying to find projects and meet people. To be honest, like we get cold calls and emails pretty regularly, and I just don't have the bandwidth to respond to most of them. And the higher up you go, you'll find that like people won't even accept unsolicited scripts if you go to Hollywood. You know, if it doesn't come through an agent or a manager or somebody you trust, they just won't look at it. And we also know that the hard way, because we went over, once upon a time, I just went around New York trying to visit film companies with the script in hand and knocking on doors. And they were like, I like really admire the passion, but we're not going to take that from you because we legally can't. Or I can take it from you, but you're going to watch me throw it in the bin because legally I'm obliged to do that. And I was like, oh, I came all this way. And they were like, sorry, dude. It's just one of the realities. But on the positive side, it's not hard. Like the barriers within the industry aren't hard. It's not hard to get access to those places, to go to those labs, to go to those markets. And when you're in that space, people do genuinely want to find the voice of tomorrow or a good project or something. You know, like those, the industry is primed to receive new talent and fresh voices and fresh ideas. It just has to be in the right spaces and through the right kind of like, I don't know what the word, not protocols or not channels, but you know what I mean, like the right setting. So anyway, so we had there was some very funny interactions with the producer who he'd done a couple of films, and he was in the tradition of producers. This was in Cape Town. He was like a very like self-important kind of guy, and he sort of liked what we were doing, and he really, like, now we look back and go, he was just trying to exploit us, get as much of us as he could out of us without having to like give us anything. And so there were a string of projects that he sort of hired us to write, and there was one where we spent like weeks putting together this crazy good pitch for a script that he said he'd had the rights to, and then it turned out he didn't even have the rights to the project. And we were like, oh, okay, like fool me once, shame on you. We like said we're never dealing with this guy again. And a couple of months later, he was like, please come back and meet me. So we went to his lounge, just filled with antiques, like opulent antiques. And he would sit there, and he had like literally like a house servant make us Turkish coffees. And we were like, okay, this is Mike and I sitting there like, this is really weird, and we shouldn't have come back here, but here we are. And he's like, you know what? I've been producing this project for, and there was a project by another South African director that this producer was attached to at the time. He wasn't by the time the film went ahead, but he was like, you know what? I don't think it's gonna work out with that director. Maybe I'm just gonna buy this script and give it to you guys. And we were like, what? Okay. So he was like, hold on. It's like, so we're sitting there drinking Turkish coffee out of tiny little glasses. He picks up his phone. He's like, no, it's so you know that little project of yours, project's name, how about I just buy that and give it to the BFAT boys? And we're literally just sitting there like, what is going on? Right. Okay. Now he's not gonna sell. And we were like, whoa, dude, this is so weird. So we I'd love to say that was the last interaction we had with this guy, but it was the third and very last interaction that we had with him. Was actually almost directly led to Five Fingers sort of being initiated. So that's why that's sort of the long roundabout reason for the story. He also then, like, we really parted ways with him. So we went scouting. So there was quite a fun project set in a small town, sort of like a zombie outbreak and a circus and a small town, and we were like, oh, it's actually pretty fun. So we were road tripping around, doing a little bit of light research for that, which was when we first started sort of finding the areas that would become the inspiration for Five Fingers. So it wasn't the long road trip of Five Fingers, but this was like an initial sort of pseudo research trip for another project. In the end, with that producer, we have had a very good lawyer who's been our lawyer since we started in the beginning, and she was very good to us in the beginning, and worked for free for us for years. Obviously now we pay her lawyer bucks, which are big, but she was amazing. And I think it's really invaluable to have that sort of like good legal mind when you're putting projects together. But she negotiated a really tight contract with them. We were like, listen, we'll write this for you, but we're not going to do it unless you pay us, because like we've been down this road 3 times now. Negotiated contract, agreed an amount, went away to write it, and the money didn't arrive. We called them, we said, listen, we're about to start, we're here, we've prepped everything, but the money hasn't arrived. And he was like, actually, I've decided I'm not going to pay you. And we're like, cool, well then we're not going to write it. And that was the end of that interaction finally. He actually passed away during COVID now, which is sad, I suppose. But yeah, so anyway, so this is sort of 5-6 years into this. No, I'm lying. It's like 3 or 4 years into our big like, yeah, RIP for sure. COVID's been a total fucking nightmare. And taken a lot of good people out of the industry too. Mooneen Lee, who was the casting director of Five Fingers, who was like one of my great industry mentors, and she was flamboyant and larger than life, and probably like one of the best people in the industry, because she's the only person who just tells it straight. One of the few people who would just tell you, like, absolutely, this is what I think about this, or you're a terrible person, or like, this is a terrible project, or there's not enough of that around, I think. She passed away, which was, yeah, that was a hard one. So anyway, so we developed like 3 or 4 projects, and none of them have come together. And right now we're going, okay, literally all we're doing now is like this MTV and branded content work, because it's the only way we're staying alive. How close are we to actually having to let this dream of Five Fingers go? Well, not Five Fingers, dream of BFAT, dream of making something go. And luckily, again, because we had this really tight support network, we were able to sort of go, look, let's just like push through it, you know. And every time one of us would be in like deep in a hole and going, I don't think it's going to work out, the others would be there to go, look, this is why we're doing it. And we started developing Five Fingers, and blah, 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 as the story goes. That took sort of 7 years to get into production, and that was really just trying to raise the money for it. We in the end, we had a combination of NFEF money, foreign money. We had private equity out of the US. We had American co-producers who were great. And how we attached them was, you know, just saying yes to opportunities. So I don't think they do it as much anymore. But as we were sort of entering those middle periods of being producers of our own work, still learning as we went, but having Sweetheart as a short film and having a little bit of a track record, we would apply to missions. So the DTI, or WESCRO, which is like the Cape Town equivalent of the GFC, Gauteng Film Commission. Cape Film Commission was another one. They would put missions together, and so they would basically pay for delegations of filmmakers to go to Tribeca or Cannes or Berlin or Sundance. Even we went as an industry building and learning sort of space. And you had to apply with projects, and by this time we had Five Fingers, which was something we were like actively working to get made. And so they would send 1 or 2 of us at a time to these places, and every opportunity that came up, we would say yes. We would go and we'd make the most out of it, you know, just go and take those meetings, go and basically like pitch the project and pitch our hearts out. And it was during one of those missions to Tribeca in New York, which is where we met the Game 7 Films guys who would become co-producers on Five Fingers. And then together we pushed for another 5 years to get it made. And eventually, you know, eventually the film got off the ground. But it was real up and down. And to get that money, there were so many different versions of trying to put that project together, from a French co-production, because the great European co-productions with South Africa, where they're treaties, where if you spend a certain amount of money on both sides, or you satisfy creative checklists, so you have enough like on-screen talent and off-screen talent to tick enough boxes on both sides, you can access money from both sides. You can get NFF money and DTI rebate, which is like a tax. It's basically like a rebate back on your budget that comes from SARS. I know I guess it's kind of complicated, but the DTI facilitates that and pays it back to you. And the French co-production didn't work out because we realized we'd be raising like 2.5 million rand of the French side to spend it all there, and it didn't satisfy the South African spend. So after like a protracted legal battle there, we ended up like going, this is like a waste of time and money. So we just cut our losses and lost a huge amount of money in probably 8 months of our lives. There was a private investor in Joburg who for 2 years just led us on this merry-go-round goose chase where he was like a self-made multi-millionaire that came out of the world of mining, is like just a short answer. And he got interested in the project. He was interested in getting the film. So for a year, we were trying to just explain to him how film finance works. And he was like, okay, I love it. And eventually after a year, we signed the contract and we were like, great, we're going ahead. And then the famous story of waiting for the money to hit the account. We were waiting for the money to hit the account, and his money was the sort of biggest at-risk money, because everybody else who was in the project at that point was quite well-known, or at least a legitimate entity. So you knew their money was good for it. And his money just didn't come. And eventually he stopped answering the phone and his email addresses stopped working. And when I eventually managed to get him on the phone 2 weeks later, he said, well, actually, I've lost all my money, so I'm not going to do it right now. And we were like, oh. So the whole thing fell apart. Believe it or not, we went back to that guy 2 years later when the project was, or he came to us when the project was getting going. He said, oh, I heard the project's getting going. We're like, oh, well, you burnt us last time. And he was like, no, I'm coming to Cape Town to let you know I'm serious. So he came to Cape Town. And again, the merry-go-round, and committed the money, like, everything committed. And when it came time for the money to arrive in the account, he sort of vanished. And I went to Joburg to sign contracts and put applications in for DTI rebates and all of that sort of stuff. And I think he was in Lesotho. And so he said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it this week. I'm in Lesotho. And I was like, I told you the deadline was Thursday and it's Monday. So what are we going to do about this? And he's like, can you get me the documents? I was like, yeah, I guess so. So I managed to, the long story short was, by Wednesday, I had somebody in Maseru driving around town with the contract, trying to find him so he would sign it. And he kept giving the runaround until eventually we learned by the by that he didn't have the money again. And he was, I don't know why he was doing it, but he was basically just like satisfying his own ego by going through this dance. I don't know. The point of all these stories, I guess, is like, it's a circus. It's never easy.
I think Skulk made a comment like, it sounds like this should be a movie. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The making of Five Fingers is totally it's an epic drama in its own right. I mean, like you're saying, the merry-go-round, but I mean, that's like a decade of intense emotional up and downness.
Yeah.
Not even a comedy short, Kenny. It's like a feature length. It's not even a comedy. It's like a black comedy, except at the end, at the end, the film gets made, which is this incredible. I mean, like, a lot of people don't know any of this. Like when you just watch the film on the screen and then you're like, oh, this character, or you make some other critique, but you have no idea what like 15 years of, blood, sweat, and tears,
Yeah. But I think the truth is, you speak to most independent filmmakers and there's these sorts of stories. And I mean, I've told some of the stories when we're down on set, so it's not like everything was easy and we just made the movie, like we had an amount of money we just managed to put together. A lot of it was in US dollars because it was coming out of the States from the American producers. And I think at that time it was when Zuma was at the height of his like fiddling with finance ministers and all of that. So the reason we were able to go into production at all in the first place was because the rand hit 16 to 1 to the dollar. And a lot of those dollars had actually been committed when it was like 10 to 1. So suddenly we found we had almost like 60% extra budget, which is literally, I'm not even kidding. That was the reason we were able to go ahead and push go in the end, because like otherwise we had more money. We had South African money. We had NFVF gave us money. We had the rebate. But really it was like, that was the thing that enabled us. So we pushed go, went into production on a budget amount, and then realized that even though we had probably a fair amount of money, you know, by South African standards at the time, not even really true anymore, we still had to cut out, like I had to cut 10 pages out of the script while we were in pre-production because we couldn't afford to shoot what we had. So I would spend my days in prep and then my nights just frantically trying to rewrite the story without sort of like taking out anything cataclysmic. Excuse me. And then we were in production. We had crazy weather problems and like storms that washed the whole town away. And we had a major recasting halfway through, which meant we had to reshoot all of the scenes that that actor had been in, or at least their parts of the scenes. And that ate a huge amount out of the budget, which our insurance company that should have covered us for that refused to pay us. So we ended up in a 2-year legal battle after the fact, trying to get the money back, which we didn't. So we lost about 700,000 rand to that. But midway through shooting, because you don't convert everything, we were converting from the dollar account as we needed it because we thought it was safer to keep the money in dollars. Halfway through the movie, it was the local elections where the ANC lost a lot of ground and there was a big exchange rate, and suddenly the value dropped from 16 down to 13. So we lost hundreds of thousands of rand just in exchange rate conversions. And that was a big like, what do we do now? So we ended up having to go back to some of this and go like shit, we may not get the movie done unless like we can figure something out, and they refinanced. And so it didn't stop even when we were in production. Every day you're sort of waiting for the whole thing to fall apart. But every day, I mean, you do like someone says beast mode, you just have to be, you know, like when you're in that mode, you know, like I think you know just from making your student films, and then it just scales up the bigger the size of the project. But there's no easy project unless maybe you're Clint Eastwood and you like just work 6 hours a day and you take, you know, you got 2 takes of everything and then you're pretty happy and your crews all work together for 45 years. You just get together and have fun. You know, but I think every project has similar stories. Every independent film has these similar sorts of stories, and that's what's amazing. This William Goldman, I think, who wrote, I'm going to say, The Princess Bride, as well as other pretty like beloved Hollywood films, wrote, I'm going to Google this quickly so I don't get it wrong, but he wrote a series of books.
Goldman, right. I think William Golding was the playwright.
Yes, yeah, William Goldman.
Goldman also sounds a lot more Hollywood, hey?
Yeah. So he wrote a book called Adventures in the Screen Trade. Which Lie Did I Tell? So yeah, he wrote 2 books. Adventures in the Screen Trade, A Personal View of Screenwriting and Hollywood, and then Which Lie Did I Tell? And he's just like these basically warts and all stories about being a screenwriter in Hollywood and just putting up with like all the bullshit, and what a circus it is all the time. So anyway, yeah, it was hell, you know, like I think somebody said it sounds like hell, and fun. It's fun in retrospect. At the time, it really is hell. And I think probably almost any producer you'd speak to would go like, every time I do a project, I lie in bed at night going, don't ever do that to yourself again, you know. And then the bug catches you and you come back, or you find an idea that you can't really like, you can't live without feeling that you want to see on screen, or a director has a vision or whatever it is, or as a writer you go like, that's the one that compels me to do it. And it's a funny thing because for me personally, I don't set out to produce other people's projects really, not from the ground up. We get involved sometimes in post on projects, or there was a Nepali project that we got involved in post and helped take out to festivals. We're looking at maybe doing a Senegalese thing right now in a similar kind of way, just finishing it up. But I think you have to love something enough to spend 10 years with it. And so it's very rare it does come along. Five Fingers was definitely one that we were in love enough to put 10 years of life into it at the expense of almost anything else. And funny, that original project, now the original Greek mythology inspired supernatural thriller, that's come around again. And one of those two original producers actually got some pretty interesting partnerships going on with UK and American producers. And so they've just bought the script again. So they're going to, it's round 2 to try to get that off the ground, which is quite fun.
Is that 15 years later?
That's 15 years later, yeah. That's 15 years later. And so I think towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year, we'll go back into that script and just try and, reconceptualize it. I think what's funny.
That was one of my questions. Like, is this thing, is that thing possible? Are you going to recontextualize it in a kind of South African setting, like what you did?
No, because it was never a very South African film. It's quite an international film. I think the thing that we need to retool it is, like, I'm 15 years older and wiser and more mature, and so some of the crazier, I don't know how to say. I think some of the ideas in it just aren't mature enough, and so I would want to go in and just make some of them smarter and a little more grounded. But then also in the 15 years, a lot of the things that we were trying to do in that movie that we thought were cool, like reimagining Greek mythology and post-apocalyptic worlds and all of that, like other movies have done that now. So we can't just go and try and do exactly what we were trying to do 15 years ago. It's not smart anymore, So we've got to find a way to smart it up and make it something that I feel like I would actually want to watch again now, because I don't think when I was 22, I sure as hell wanted to watch that movie. But now that you're pushing 40, I definitely don't, I don't feel the need to go and watch, or not that, I don't know. It's different. It's not smart enough or deep enough. So anyway, yeah, so it comes around and round and round. And so with Five Fingers, it really, we put the time and effort and investment into it. It was something we really believed in, and has, people don't see the 10 years, 15 years of stress and sweat and sleepless nights that go into it. All they see is what's on screen. And that's something I actually do really enjoy talking about. It's not glamour. Filmmaking is not glamour. Producing is not glamour. It's trench warfare, and it's something that you really need good people around you. You need people you can trust. You need people who are sort of on a unified vision, because it's going to get hard. And when it gets hard, you sort of need people to be standing side by side to do it. There was a point. Where was I going with this? There was a very good point I was going to make with this.
On that note, where's the kind of Apocalypse Now timeline looking like? I think most of the students are aware of the Apocalypse Now project, the short film that you had as a kind of proof of concept.
Yeah.
And last time we spoke, you mentioned something about, before pre-COVID, you were like, we might be going into production early 2020 or something.
Yeah.
So what's the current state of affairs with that one?
So that's an interesting. I'll go all the way back with that one as well, because this is an interesting project. So that very first Tribeca trip where we met the producers who we did Five Fingers with, we also met. He wasn't a producer at that point. Todd Brown, who at that point was running a website called Twitch Film, which became Screen Anarchy. Maybe some of you guys read it, but he was a Canadian guy who was just very interested in film and sort of had managed to get his finger on the pulse of what was going on in the world of genre film. And he at the time was joining a company called XYZ, who now are one of the biggest genre sales companies in the world, actually production companies even, based out of LA. So this is in 2010 or maybe the beginning of 2011, formed a very casual relationship with him because we were pitching Five Fingers and he saw Sweetheart, which was our short. And so we had a couple of calls and got friendly. And in the end, we went to LA and met the XYZ guys. And it was all very casual and by the by. And but that relationship stayed good. And as we got closer to Five Fingers going ahead and we were developing a couple of other things, that company just got stronger and stronger. The relationship got stronger and stronger. And we invited him to come out to South Africa, and he came and sort of saw how much cool shit was going on here. And he found the book Apocalypse Now. And actually, he was like, "Well, why don't we do this together as a movie?" And so that was that again, like, because you never really know what relationships are going to lead to a project or something new. It could be 10 years later. And so for a casual meeting and a couple of calls and a bit of like mutual admiration, we end up working together. Now we're doing a bunch of things together. We're doing a TV show together. I'm writing something for him and another Canadian producer right now. So and we, like, it's all personal relationships, an industry driven by relationships, collaborations, working with people you like, respect. And if you don't like them, at the very least, respect them. But those relationships are long term, I think I personally, I feel like it's only worth it because of the relationships. I think relationships, just my personal life philosophy is the people are the things that make it worthwhile, and so sure, we can spend all our time on projects, but if you're putting 10 years into a Five Fingers and the film comes out and it's a stinker and everybody hates it, if all you've had is like, oh, I want to make this film, then you're going to be pretty bitterly disappointed. But the adventures, the ups and downs, the shared like triumphs and failures, and the things you've shared with the people going along the way, you can like sit together and go, man, like we really fucked that up, and laugh about it. I think or success is only valuable when you're sharing it. Like, is there really, for me, it's not satisfying to go and stand on the stage at a festival by yourself and go like, oh, I did it. You want to be there you want to be there with a collection of people that you've gone through the trenches with together. My personal philosophy. I think not everybody would say that. But that's how I see it. And I see a question here about like, oh, were there moments when you lost your drive to continue? Definitely. Climbed out of it again through people, and it was, I think, to be honest, while we were in production, there wasn't time to lose the drive and fall apart. Like, that was not an option, because if you lose your drive and fall apart while you're in production, something goes wrong. You just have to get it done. Be it like an actor who won't come out of his hotel room because it's cold and he hasn't slept. And so, one of my highest and lowest points was going to beat on his door at I think it, with a bit of context, like, I understand both sides. He'd originally been scheduled the day off, and then there was a schedule change, and so we needed him on set, and he just like basically refused to come out of his hotel room. But the whole crew was on set waiting for him, and it was pouring with rain, and I just went, and it wasn't even my problem. Like, I had a million other things to do, but somebody was like, Sean, you've got to go and get him out. Like, basically, I don't think anybody else could have gotten him out. So I went, and I just like, bang, 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 bang. You've got to come to set. Everybody's waiting for you. I'm not coming. Da, da, da. And so I just sat outside his room in the rain, because it was like it was an outdoor thing. I just sat there for 45 minutes outside his room, just periodically going, I'm still here. And somebody like bought me a coffee, and somebody bought me a cheese sandwich, and I was just sitting there the whole time. Like, there's no time to break down. You just do whatever you have to do to like get the actor onto set, or get the whatever, like drive somebody to hospital if they've been like something fell on them, or I don't know, a million different stories. But definitely in the development, the financing, the trying to put the project together, I think especially when it fell apart that last time, the second time, and that guy kind of screwed us over, the realization that like all the energy we put in had been for nothing, that was quite crushing. That was an almost like end of the project thing. But it wasn't, because people pull each other through, and also because I think this was the one. This is something I believed in so strongly that I would have never forgiven myself if I hadn't picked it up and gotten back into it. Yeah, that's it. It's okay to go hide in your car, I think, as long as you come back out again, and I think it's also about handling those situations professionally and properly. Like, you can't, because the also thing about this is, like, the actor's not completely in the wrong. He's not in the right, but he's not completely in the wrong. You have to be empathetic there. You can't, I think there's nobody, you sort of, from being a good producer, you sort of have to be the smartest, most level-headed person in the room. So when shit's falling apart, you got to be the one that's trying to find a solution. It doesn't do any good for you to be smashing chairs around and shouting at people and telling them, like, get your shit together. I don't think that's very constructive. Sure, do it in private, lie in bed and like punch your pillow or whatever it is you have to do, or like go run it out, you know. But I think, yeah, I think that for me anyway, like just being the smartest, most composed voice in the room and having the solution, you know, like people are going to look to you for the solution. So if you're losing your shit, you can't pull a Trump, you know, like you're not flailing around wildly, like shouting at the TV. You've got to be the level-headed room and go like, somebody's got to fix this problem. Somebody's got to like.
I'm glad you're getting into the sort of the producer role, or sort of just describing, you know, part of how you sort of your philosophy about being a producer. I think it's really cool what you said now. You know, and I was going to ask you about that. I mean, we can talk about the fact that you are a writer producer just now, and wearing those two hats. The one being, I mean, both are obviously extremely creative, but the one is pure creative, as in you're writing the screenplay, and the other is a very organizational, you know, pragmatic, like in the moment kind of role. But let's quickly just talk before you talk about that balancing act and what the one brings to the other. Maybe tell us, you know, I feel like there isn't enough education around being a good producer, whether it's in the film industry, whether it's in the music industry. You know, the South African arts infrastructure, like a lot of people become producers over time spent in the industry because they realize that's where the gap is, or they realize that's what they're good at, like, you know, making projects happen and setting things up and making those connections. But it's almost like I wish we had just a subject called film production, where we took the people who showed a bit of an interest in this and just trained them to be better at it. And then you could almost have a degree. I don't know, there probably are some degrees like that I'm just not aware of. But, you know, like I almost wish it was one of our majors, because we do sometimes do like production management modules and stuff like that, where we teach everybody about the forms and about how to do good location scouting and how to, you know, keep the protocol in place and indemnity forms and like all the, you know, all the things that need to be in place in terms of paperwork. But being a producer it's like people skills, it's connecting. You know, in some ways I'm a producer. I love that kind of thing, like connecting things and making things happen. Yeah, maybe just riff off of what I've said there. I haven't really posed an actual question, but maybe.
No. I mean, I think you've raised an interesting topic. I think it's quite an amorphous role, and I think that's what makes it so hard to teach. I think a lot of the time it's taught really through mentorship and through time in the trenches and through doing in relationships, you know. And so I learned to be a producer through relationships and through producers that I was interacting with and working on projects with, and I think maybe some people instinctively take it on. I think the reason we chose to produce our own work is because we wanted to be, number one, we didn't think anybody could tell the story better than we could. And I think we want to take responsibility. Once we learned by putting too many projects in other people's hands and waiting for them to actualize them for us, we realized, shit, if we don't do this ourselves, we're not actually going to be, we're going to be waiting for someone else to do it for us the whole time, you know. So we actively set out to learn and take the hits and sort of put the time in the trenches. And I think it's probably similar to most, you know, as an aside, most disciplines, because somebody can teach you how to edit, and that they can teach you how to use the edit software. Someone can teach you how to use the camera, like what lens is right now, what these different lights do in combination. But unless you put the time and the effort in to really hone your craft, whatever it may be, you're not going to be a master in whatever your thing is. So the teaching and the doing are different. And I feel like the people who really live something and can't help but, you know, like pour all their time into it, generally the ones who get ahead, or who find that edge in whatever it is that they're doing. So I mean, what is a producer? So yeah, production management, production and producing are different things. I think in South Africa, a lot of the time producers end up doing both because of the way the industry is sort of set up. I think a lot of the time it's line producers who become producers, or who go out to finance projects, but knowing they're probably going to be managing or line producing or whatever it is in the projects themselves. Whereas I think bigger industries are set up where the producing is really on a grand level, and it's doing the deals and it's raising the money and setting up the distribution. It's finding and developing projects. And the producer is a very creative role. it's finding a script you love and formulating this first sort of vision for what it is, and then putting that in the hands of the director, or finding the director with the vision and going, I love this, I'm going to help you actualize this, you know. But for me, the idea of a producer being someone who's only on the business side, there are producers like that. For me, I like to get very creatively involved, and that's why generally we only produce our own projects, because we have a vision for something and we're going to be part of it. We're going to be responsible for how this thing is realized. I want to be, you know, I don't want to direct something myself, but I want to be in the room calling those creative shots, you know, making those decisions and crafting what it is and casting the film. And I love to get very involved in casting. I read with most of the actors and all that sort of stuff, you know, being very kind of hands-on there. Doing the deals, but I don't love production, for example. So we typically will develop a project and then team up with another company to run the production, or we'll find a great line producer to do it. So I'm not good at that. So I don't try and force myself into those roles. There are people much better than that. What I could do is put a big picture together and sort of craft the whole vision.
So maybe just run a definition of how you see the difference between how you've just kind of described producing on a higher level, like bringing the team players together to get the
Okay.
And what do you mean by production? Do you mean the actual shooting and the
so production? So I think you, on the bigger level, you have to understand budgeting, you have to understand scheduling, but I wouldn't necessarily break down a budget myself, or not in the nitty-gritty, or try and put a schedule together. So you assemble the right people to do the job. So you, as the captain of the ship, finds the director. Together, you sort of appoint the crew, the HODs of the people you want. You find a great line producer to break the budget down and budget it. You find a great AD to schedule it. And then the line producer generally will put their production team together, and the AD will put his team together. And so you really just sit at the top and make sure that it's a management position. It's a creative management position. It's also, you are, the buck stops with you. So you have to have, like I say, the solution to the problem. So we have a schedule problem. The AD comes and goes, we can't afford to shoot your 110-page script. You either have the presence of mind to go, okay, what can we afford? Let's try and make that work. Or you go, you just shoot it because that's what we like. That's the script and we have to do it. And then you're setting yourself up for failure, because, you know, like you're trying to force a size 15 foot into a size 12 shoe, and eventually you're going to lose a toe. But that's something, and that's a problem for later on, because you're going to learn that, you know, like you can't walk with 9 toes, or you have to figure out how to solve big story problems in the edit, because you tried to push ahead with the film that was too big for the budget and the schedule that you had available. And that's something that I often see evaluating projects, is going like, I love this script, but this is a case of you've written a 20 million rand script that should be shot over 8 weeks or 9 weeks, but you have 10 million rand and you want to shoot it in 4. And so it's like, love the script, but what you're trying to do is not, these are incompatible things. And so I think the presence of mind to just know how to manage all of those things, and to put people in place who are better than you to do it. And that's actually also my approach to writing, because writing is a creative pursuit, but it's also functional. Screenwriting especially it's a weird balance between being highly creative but also highly functional, because what you're setting out is something that sure is a creative document in itself, but it's also the roadmap, it's the argument, it's the schematic, the floor plan on which the whole film is going to be built. Because if I, as the writer, is doing the best job of telling the story, then there's something very wrong in the situation. You're putting down the sort of the most concise, most minimal yet detailed version of the story arc, the turning points, the beats, the character details, the dialogue itself. Obviously, some people are precious about dialogue. I'm not very precious about my words, as long as the intention is right. So if an actor comes in and doesn't want to say, like, close the damn door, Mary, but and has their own version of that, but the intention is to get Mary to close the door, then like say whatever you want. What's important for the story for me is, you know, it's that story beat. Or if you can do it without saying the line at all, even better, you know, just like give Mary that look, or whatever it is. But so your job as the writer is to lay that foundation down, the barest minimal description that's enough detail to tell the story, and then the director, the cinematographer, the costume designer, the production designer, every actor, it's their job to do a better job of telling that story than you are. because all that's going to count when people get to the end of the day is to see what's on screen, you know. And you really do tell your story 3 times. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's totally true. And I like to say, your script is sort of like your open, you make a case, you know, your opening statements. You make a case for a film. The production is the interpretation, and you'll go through there's a million reasons why things might change. It might be budgeting, scheduling, weather, improv, a better idea on the day. You may just realize something doesn't work and you have to retool it. But so things change as you shoot every day. Things change, something changes. And then you get to the edit and you have your script as the sort of like roadmap, and you have your footage, which are the building blocks, and you reassemble your story, and things will change and timing will change within scenes. Scenes will move around. You'll cut scenes out, you'll cut lines, you'll completely recraft your story in whatever way best serves the final film, because that's all that counts. It doesn't matter if you had a masterpiece of a script. If you have like a dog show of footage and you have to find something totally new out of it when you're in the edit, that's what you have to do, because when people come in to watch the movie, that's all they're going to get. And they don't care about the 10 years it took you to get it made. They don't care about the issues you had in production. They don't go, oh, I mean, geez, it was terrible. But you know, they had such budget and weather issues, so it wasn't that bad. Like that doesn't happen. You know, they go like, wasn't very good. And it sort of amazes you to hear how many films have gone through huge, how many even prominent South African films have gone through huge retooling in the edit, because what they got in the can was just a huge disaster. And then what they managed to build out of it was something special.
It's not even fair to say that people don't care, because a lot of people do care, but like people don't know. Like the point is, what's on the screen is what they have access to.
It's people do care, obviously, but it's not a pass mark. People aren't going to go, it was a terrible movie, but they got all these things. Like maybe they are, but it doesn't change the fact that the movie doesn't work, you know. So that's one of the benefits, I think, to being a writer and producer, is naturally sort of having to understand both sides there. And a lot of that is learning through doing. I mean, going through that with Five Fingers was crazy. I think from a initially very creative point of view, the first few drafts of the script were like 180 pages, 160 pages, 140 pages, until it eventually got into a range where we were like, okay, this is creatively satisfying, but also achievable, because we've chipped away the fat and cut subplots and really like honed the writing. And I sort of always overwrite my first few drafts anyway, because I like to just get every idea out on the page. So even if I think it maybe won't work, I'll put it down anyway. And then going through and revising, a lot of the time I'll take it out, or if I think maybe it works, but I'm just going to run it by a couple of people to see. Usually they'll confirm when something works when you've sent it to, you know, a couple of people to go like take that out, and then you go, okay, I knew that was going to happen. And then having a 123 page, 124 page script that we really loved, that we sort of considered to be the locked final version, then realizing we didn't have enough money to shoot that, so cutting that down to 110, 111 pages. That was the film we financed. And then when we were in prep, like I was saying, we realized we had to take out 10 pages of that. Otherwise, we just weren't going to get anything in the can. And so rather than try and shoot the 111 pages that we had and solve it later, like the rational brain said, we have to solve this now. Otherwise, we're really going to be in trouble later on. And so we cut that down and shot 110 pages. And then even then, we lost quite a lot in production because of budget, schedule, and weather. So we definitely were trying to solve things while we were in the edit, despite all the sort of buffering we tried to put in place when we were going through it. So that's you know, like it's I sort of can't say it enough, but writing and rewriting and rewriting and reading, that's what screenwriting is. But it's also not being indulgent, you know. Like it's me going, my job is to tell a great story, but the job of the script is to inspire everybody else to do a better job of telling that story. Otherwise, write a book. You know, you're not a novelist, you're a screenwriter. You're writing for the screen, and I want a director or an editor, sure, but also I want the costume designer to go like, oh, I love this character, and I want to bring him to life. You know, I want an actor to go, I love what you put down there, and then build reams of backstory and layers for this character. And great films are the films where everybody is sort of firing on those levels. And And the great producer enables all of that to happen, you know. So the great producer enables the screenwriter, tools them to do the best thing, and puts the right people in place, and also has to manage the vision, you know. So the director has the vision for the film, sure, or the, you know, the producer and director may craft that vision together, but the director is the one who's got to drive it and realize it. And I think the producer's job there is to protect the vision and make sure that the director has everything they need to be able to do it. Including crew, and that's, you know, a great production crew is going to make sure the director is not running around trying to solve problems themselves. That's the job of the people whose job it is to solve them, and the producer at the top of that is, I mean, be it like directing second unit for 2 weeks because somebody has to do it, or like whatever it takes, you know, literally like digging a car out if you have to, if there's nobody else to do it. I think the producer is the person where the buck stops, and there's no job that's too big and no job that's too small. I think that's a common thing from producers I admire. It's like there's no hesitation to get down to the trenches. And so from everything from like literally just like dirtying shit up and trying to like plant poles, street lights, and move cars on Apocalypse Now, to Five Fingers, like the story trying to get the actor out of the room, driving someone to hospital in a town like an hour and a half away, going to the bank and trying to persuade them to give us money again, or literally having to, on a Sunday morning, recast one of the lead roles in the film and try and organize to get the actor in town by that night so they could shoot the next day. Those are the problems that you're solving on a daily basis. Or, oh shit, we have to raise another $1 million because of an exchange rate issue, you know? So that's producing.
Wow, you've really sold it. It's and the crazy thing for me about like the way you're describing it is it never really ends. I mean, it starts with the concept, and it doesn't really end because of the afterlife of the film in the film festival circuits and it's touring with it and stuff. My next question is related to, I mean, I love what you've said about relationships being what makes it worth the making, and the suffering and the hardship of the creative process is like, because you get to walk that path with other people, you know, and then you share those memories and all of that. That really resonates with me. You know, the journey is the destination, that thing. But let's quickly take a moment to be sort of realistic and hard about the South African filmmaking industry. So 2 years ago, we had another friend of mine, Johan Cronje, come in to talk about his movie Wonderless. And he just also spoke about the nightmare uphill about getting funding, and you have to get co-finance from the NFVF and also maybe some other sources. And eventually you've got these millions backing you, and then you make this movie and you have to downsize on set because your budget doesn't cover the things you thought it would. And then it goes to cinema or perhaps film festival circuit. Like, do South African feature films break even / make a profit? Can we name any movies that really do that? And you know, except for like the Candace Sammy series perhaps, or of Leon Schuster's movies, or some of the very like mainstream on the nose kind of cinema. And secondly, is the cultural capital that you gain from something like Five Fingers, maybe if you don't mind sharing some actual numbers so we can sort of get the picture, because in our view, Five Fingers is this very successful film. It's like, it took you 10 decades. How do you even measure 10 decades? 10 decades. 10 years.
Decades. I mean, it felt like 10 decades.
Yeah. How do you measure a century of trying to get funding?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting thing, and I see there's a comment like shady producers, and so it's a complex space. I would say very few South African films break even, you know, because to break even, there's so many different factors that have to go into it. You've got to pay investors back, usually with a premium on top of their investment, because that's the, you know, it's a sizable premium, but they take a huge risk by putting money in. In an ideal world, you pay back the NFVF as well, because that's recoupable money, because then they put it back into other projects. It doesn't really work. Very few people ever pay them back. But a film goes to cinema, and the amounts of money that come off that cinema, that the dollar that comes in, let's say dollar because it's like the global whatever, so it comes into cinema, and immediately the theater takes 50% of that, and then it goes to the distributor, and the distributor takes their commission, which is, I mean, like, let's say 20-25%, depends what you can negotiate, maybe lower if you have a better deal, and then the money comes back into the film. And so that's already only like a quarter to a third of that dollar that's come in. So let's say like your 30 cents or whatever it is comes back to the film, and then that goes to the investors to pay them off, and maybe to the producer, depending how you've scaled that thing. So the money that comes back to the film is negligible compared to, like, it's just not an industry that's geared to put money back in people's pockets. So it's very hard for films to recoup. There is non-recoupable money in South Africa, like the DTI rebate, which is a bonus that not a lot of industries have. So what we have here is a climate that is it's better geared to make films than, let's say, the American independent industry, because there are none of those kickbacks and rebates there. But the European industry, which is robust government funding, like the French industry, I think really puts money in to projects. It's not a monopoly though, and shady producers is interesting. I think sure there are cases where there are shady producers, but I think generally the shady producers are the ones that are putting big fees for themselves in the budget, because that's really the only way you're going to make money if you're a producer or director through a project. Like put aside the expectation of earning all the money on the back end. And I think it's a misconception here. If I think about, like, Five Fingers hasn't made its money back and won't ever. We haven't even paid off our investors. We didn't take fees for ourselves as producers. We took negligible writer and director fees that we only got on the back end. Like, we deferred it, so it's not profits. We just knew until the money made a little bit of money, we couldn't justify taking any money. So a lot of the time you can defer your fee, which means you don't get paid out of production budget. All the money goes on screen, but then as soon as the movie makes a little bit of money, the first things to get paid are deferment. So it usually goes to like some of your key cast, or maybe your writer, director, or producers. Anybody who's like willing to do that, to not get paid up front, to get paid on the back end. Then the money goes to the investors, and they earn their premium, and then eventually it gets, you have what's called a waterfall, and that just dictates how the money gets paid back. So it goes to usually the commission, which be the sales company that sells it on. So you produce a film, and then you sell it to different territories for an amount of money, and you have a sales company that does it usually. So even if they sell it to Netflix as a big global deal, they'll take a commission of that amount of money, which is anywhere between 10 and like 18%. Some charge more, like up to 25, but whatever you can negotiate, let's call it like 15 as a break and even. So if you get $1 million in on your project, they'll take 15% of that, so $150,000, and then the rest of it comes back into the film, and that usually, depending what your budget was, will go to pay the investors. But nobody's earning money through South African cinema for sure. Often a TV sale will be okay. Like Mnet actually pays pretty decent money for South African films, like, to their credit. But there's no, like, I would say the producers who are making a lot of money are the service producers, probably. So the guys who jump on board, like whatever Hollywood film comes out here, and they facilitate it, and they take a big commission out of that. So the shadiest guys who I know are the ones who do that, and they just carve themselves a big slice out of the dollar budget for virtue, but by virtue of having facilitated the whole thing. There are a lot of South African films people point to and go, "Oh, the producers are just making all the money," and I can guarantee you they're not. Like, South African producers don't make money out of profit of films that like make a lot of money. It's just not a thing that exists. It's also not a monopoly, because it's not like the amounts of money that are coming in are insane. So if I think about something like, let's use Indigenous as an example, who yeah, I can talk about that, Lou, as well. The distribution companies here aren't making huge amounts of money either. So the cinema chains, it costs a lot of money to run them, so they take a big amount of money out of the pie. The distribution companies, I think, earn very little money too, because they exist to support the arts and support the projects, and every now and again one will make a bunch of money, and that's what sort of ties them over for the projects they support that don't don't make money, they've got to recoup on marketing costs, like designers, printing, airtime, trailers, all of that stuff that they cut together. But Louis' comment, don't do the job if you don't do it because you enjoy it. Yeah, for sure. I think that's why we make films, right? We love it. I think that's why any producer who's making films would say that they do. That's why we are compelled to put 10 years of our lives into these things, because we couldn't not do it. It wouldn't be an option not to do it. It's like the burning compulsion to create and tell stories.
I think, you know, when Johan was here, was on campus, and we were talking about Wonderless, and he was also telling the kind of financial background of it, and it also did relatively okay in South African cinema terms, but also didn't even break even. Zodwa, your mic is on. Then how, like, I mean, he started with, I think it's Tarkovsky who said, like, you know, film is an unhappy art because it's also a business. Like, like, what are we saying? Like, it's a really gloomy picture. Like, sure, we can say, no, you must make films because it's burning in your heart and you have the passion and stuff. But how do you, you know, should we be advising students to start looking at the TV industry, to start looking at like Netflix and the streaming options, and like rather make series and start writing story arcs which can continue over a season instead of just an hour and a half? Or as a secondary question, and sorry, I'm loading you with two things, but I did write this down, I don't want to forget, is, you know, here at film school, we tend to do what film critics generally have done for the last 120 years, which is kind of say, look at these genre movies and look at what genre is. And it's an interesting space because genre fans expect convention, but then they also expect something original, which is why something like District 9 did as well as it did. And Five Fingers is obviously super interesting because you sort of glocalize, you know, you take a global thing and then you make it local, and that's really interesting to view. But generally I, as a film theory lecturer, my power just died, but I think the UPS and my battery laptop should still keep me online. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Anyway, power just died, but I think I'm still here. Usually we tend to advise students away from genre movies because we're like, genre is, you know, it is what the word is. It's generic. It's a copy-pasted version of the same thing over and over, which has value. Like, genre movies in many ways are like a ritual. It's like you know what to expect, so you engage in the ritual, and it comforts you and it sends you back out into the world feeling hopeful. Like, there's obviously like value in genre movies. But we try to, you know, we try to, I guess, say something like lean into the auteur thing and like try find your voice. And sure, it's collaborative, but genre movies aren't art movies, you know, or like, and should, you know, at our school we even have like film arts in the name. Like, we take the arts but very seriously, and we want people to experiment while they're students and to find a voice and to, you know, like become artists and stuff. Maybe just riff on all of those problems I've dropped in your lap now.
Yeah, I mean, problems, because I think it depends. What I think is exciting about the South African industry now is there's space for all of those things. I think it's always been an art-driven industry, and there are a lot of auteurs who still make auteur work, but there also are more and more commercial filmmakers and more commercial avenues. Like Netflix is a very commercial space. Netflix, as like the new kid on the block snapping up South African content, is looking to satisfy its audience, and it's an audience that for the most part is mainstream minded, you know. So its genre is high on the list of what they're looking for and accessible. And I don't think genre is a dirty word. I think you can do genre smartly. You know, I think we talked about this when I was there. Is what I love about the power of genre is that the rules are so familiar to people, and so that actually allows you to go in interesting directions. So doing a Western, you know, the conventions of the Western, we've set up a town, these sort of archetypal characters, but because you understand the archetypes, we can get more interesting with them. We can get more interesting with where we take the story and any sort of subtext and meaning we're trying to work into it, because we don't need to explain to you the foundation. And that's true, I think, of genre across the board. Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite filmmakers because he's so beautifully mixes his artistic sensibilities with genre, you know, be it like Pan's Labyrinth is a fantasy that's also like a war allegory and a story of a girl's coming of age and self-realization. Or what was the last thing he did that was really good?
Pacific Rim. No, I'm just joking. You probably
Yeah, but he does, you know. But then he makes something like Pacific Rim, which is like a genre fucking just like good time because he wanted to, and then he makes Shape of Water, which is also like a fairy tale, poetic sort of fairy tale. So it's possible to do those sorts of things, or even something like Parasite, you know, like Bong Joon-ho makes like crazy genre films because he did The Host and he did like half of what he's done. Actually, the Korean films are very good at mixing genre with art house sensibilities. Parasite is, you know, it's a thriller, really. It's sort of like a potboiler psychological thriller, which is a genre film. It's just done in such an accessible. It's accessible as a genre film, but it's also like deep and artistic and auto-driven, you know. So I don't think you need to separate those things. And what I love about the South African industry now is you can do whatever you want, and sort of, it's not easy, of course, but you can find a way you can find an avenue for it. Festivals are loving both genre films and sort of art house darlings. And so if you look at the different films that are going between, like, This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection, which is Jeremiah Moses, his film that he just made, which is super art house, like artistic as a motherfucker, but it's just winning awards at festivals everywhere it goes. It was at Sundance. At the same time, you have Fried Barry, which is like a crazy genre film that's also just playing like the genre festivals and the fantasy festivals. And right now, the two of those are on the festival circuit, and they will never, like, it would blow my mind to see one festival put the two of them together, but each is finding its way. And at the same time, there are like films that are going straight to Netflix, genre films that are going straight to Netflix, because that's Netflix's model, is they don't want you to do any festivals. They want to own it in its entirety, put it out there, but it's a space where films can live. Something like, I just saw that Riding with Sugar, which is, I think it's going to be sort of, I don't know too much about it, but I think it's sort of artistically minded, feel good kind of historical biopic that's been in development and production for a while. That's going to Netflix. I just saw that today. And at the same time, they're showing films like Santana, which is just like a dumb action movie, you know, like the avenues exist for all of those. Showmax is getting involved. They're producing Showmax original horror movies that go straight to Showmax and sort of medium low budgets. So
I think what's Mr. De Beer? Beer Adriaanse.
Yeah.
What's that movie called again?
It was either, there were two that they did. It was either Rage or Parable or something. It was one of the two of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him posting about that recently. Like,
yeah, so those avenues just really, like, a lot of the time they're built out of relationships. So you can't just go to Netflix, because Netflix gets a million mails a day from people going, I've got an idea for a movie, I've got an idea for a series, can we make this? Again, you can't just, like, you've got to nurture those relationships, find a realistic space to meet them, and sort of build that relationship as you go. And that includes with, like, Mnet or Netflix or Paramount, you know, whoever's in your sites. But these things also take time. Don't expect to just, like, land a series straight away. I think you've got to put the legwork in, and really, I think making your own work, making shorts, making contacts, that's the stuff that's most important now. Like, develop, write, hone your craft, but don't expect to go out and land like a series. Work your way there, you know. Impress people with what you can do. Make a short that people are going to see and go like, wow, I want to work with that filmmaker because I've seen what you can do.
The short film is a lot like a sort of business card that people take seriously. If you think about Neil Blomkamp made that short Alive in Joburg in 2005 and used that, I'm quite sure, to pitch the idea for District 9, you know. And
yeah. I mean, the power of the proof of concept is for real. We've seen it with Apocalypse Now, and it's not uncommon now to do a proof of concept short for something that you would do a director's treatment, and obviously you still want to do a really great, beautiful visual director's treatment. You could also shoot something that shows what you're going to do with the film. And it's the best way as well of sort of cutting your teeth and knowing whether, you know, finding the visual voice or knowing whether you can actually do it or not. So it's with Apocalypse Now, as much as wanting to do something really cool that we could use to sort of get out and pitch the film, I think we had to just go through that and test the waters and make sure we could do what we had in mind. Could we hit those genre beats? Could we hit that style? There was something I was going to say now. Oh, again, I've lost it.
While you're thinking, I'm just going to riff quick, because in the first year, all these students sitting here endured my academic skills class, and one of the videos I showed them was, I also forwarded to you actually, Sean, was that Tim Minchin thing where he was, and this thing has always stuck with me, and I've realized it has been my own creative philosophy, and it's exactly what you're saying now, is like, be micro ambitious. Like you do have this big dream lingering in the back of some epic project that you think you might get to at some point, but for the time being, work really hard on what is in front of you, and the next project will appear in your periphery, is the way that he says it. And that's such a beautiful metaphor for me about the creative working life. Is like, I'm really focused on this thing in front of me, and I'm staring at it, and I'm working damn hard, but in the corner of my eye, those other connections pop up. And if I trail back 20 years of making creative things, like, it's just like that. It's relationship, it's like getting to know people, but there's always a spark that comes from one other thing that I'm busy with, and a person, and a phone call, and an email, and etc. And then the next thing blossoms, and I don't have to write that down at the beginning of the year. I'm going to make these 10 things this year. Like, I mean, 2020 is a perfect case study of like how ridiculous that exercise is, even though, of course, it can be useful to write those things down for yourself, like the future authoring, Jordan Peterson style thing of like writing down what you imagine in the future. But at micro ambitious, stay busy, and the periphery, like those are really valuable.
I think that's totally like hit the nail on the head. I think you have to have those big picture things. You don't have to, but for me, those big picture things have always sort of have been there, and knowing, over those 10 years, Five Fingers was the long-term goal, but it wasn't all we were doing. Obviously, we were developing other projects, and I was writing on stuff, and every part of the team was doing little things and working to hone their skills and get better at doing what they do. The first time Michael and I ever went over to LA, we were pitching. We were sort of just, we weren't even pitching anything. We went over because we happened to be there, and we were invited sort of on the strength of Sweetheart to take some pretty good meetings. And we were going to be asked, like, what's your dream project? And we have this big, like, adaptation of a beloved franchise from when we were kids, and we go like, that's the one we want to do. And they were like, oh, cool, what would you do with it? And we'd be like, it'd be big, like we had no idea what we were doing. But that dream project has always been in the sort of back burner for the last year and a half or so. There's been a very real conversation about we may actually be able to take that on and adapt it into a movie. So I don't believe in the put things out and they'll come back to you. But I think if you have things in mind, you often actively take steps to actualize them without realizing it, or with realizing it. But keep those big goals, keep them in the pocket, because you never know. And also, don't say no to opportunity. And this is one that I think it's quite an important one. Something comes along, say yes to it. Obviously, like, weigh it up, and if it's bad for you, don't say no. But like, saying no out of fear is not generally a good. It's not generally a good attitude. I think somebody offers you an opportunity to say yes. If you're on set, like, generally the rule is don't say no if you're on set. Somebody says, I need you to do this thing, say no, like, because everybody's in that work mode that I was talking about before. Like, the word no is just an immediate, like, whoa, circuit breaker. And I think that's true of life as well. Like, come and assist your friends on their sets. Everybody's shooting stuff that with no money, even now, like, as success, like, doesn't necessarily mean suddenly endless wealth. People are all still shooting. Most of the filmmakers are still shooting stuff for no money on the side, still nurturing passions, even even at the top of the game. The Mandalorian only exists because what's his name who made the Mandalorian? Jon Favreau really wanted to do it, couldn't get Disney to agree to it, so he just wrote the script for the whole season and said, well, here it is, here's what I want to do. They didn't give him any money to do that. He wasn't like, I'm not going to start doing this until you pay me. He was like, I want to do this so much, I'm just going to write it. So people are still putting that legwork in, and generally, like, say yes to opportunities, because you never know. It might mean you're going to be working with somebody today who ends up like producing a project for you, or something down the line, or you may meet an actor you really want to work with, or you're just really not knowing. I think that's the strength of the whole thing. Like, not knowing what the future holds is one of the most exciting things, because the opportunities really could come out of left field, and it could be somebody, again, like with this project I was saying, just picked up again. I don't think we thought for a million years that one of the original producers who was trying to help us get off the ground would arrive with the backing to actually buy the script and go, now we're going to put a real machine behind it to try to get this film made on the budget level that it should have been made the first time around. You just really never know. I had another point to do with all of this. I was going to say, there's one thing I keep wanting to say that keeps like getting there, and then I'm talking about something else, and it just escapes me. It will come back to me before we're done.
After this session, then you're welcome to drop it to me in an email.
Yeah.
Robin, I have a question. Are there any filmmakers that you would identify as auteurs? Any South African filmmakers that you would ascribe that word to? Because it is this kind of holy word, and we like we always do it's Fellini and it's Bergman and it's Antonioni and all those games. But are there South African filmmakers that you think are getting to this point where they have a distinct voice, and they've built a body of work, which I guess those would be the two parameters I would use, like distinct body of work, psychological preoccupations, and stylistic trademarks. Like who's doing that?
Yeah, I don't like calling out individual people, because I feel like it's not a big enough industry to start calling out like who I like and don't like. But I also think the word auteur has been sort of given this meaning that I don't think it was ever necessarily really intended to have. I think you could point to almost any filmmaker in South Africa who's making films regularly and go, they've carved their voice. Because you can point to, like, you name a filmmaker and go, they have a style, they have a voice. I don't think there's anybody really who's working at the high level that's churning out sort of generic, indistinct stuff, because the people that are doing that we don't really hear about or talk about. So I think in a way, just by virtue of by not being an industry geared to be churning stuff out over and over again, anybody who's fought to the point they're making a movie is putting their imprint on it. So yeah, in a way, like, in the auteur sense, who's an auteur? Sure, like historically we have, and right now we probably have a couple of candidates who are putting a body of work together to go, like, you have an archive. But at the same time, in the auteur sense of like a director with a vision driven that they've managed to get onto screen, yeah, like almost anybody who's out there doing the festival circuit now is doing that, I would say.
I like that. I like that you're in many ways deconstructing the concept of auteur as this sort of higher than everyone else kind of artist, because if you really think about what the word author means, when you just take it back, it just means someone who is writing, like someone who has something, like. And maybe,
I think, like we love to canonize history. We love to canonize artists who were just making a work that was true to them, and it's true of film, it's true of like visual art. It's I think it's part of how we interpret that sort of stuff. But I don't like the idea of an auteur being an auteur is people make the sort of films that they make, and you could argue that Spielberg is an auteur because he has a very distinct style, vision, and has imprinted himself on 50 years of filmmaking. But I think people often hesitate to ascribe the word to him, which I think is and I don't love all of his films. I love a lot of his older films. I don't love a lot of his newer films. I would never try and I'm not trying to pass a value judgment. I just think it's an interesting word that gets used. And I also, my filmic tastes run from like some very serious and very artistic stuff to some real like pulp, like The Warriors is one of my favorite films, which Walter Hill, I don't think you would argue is like high art or high cinema, but goddamn, I love that movie. It has an energy and a soul and a pulse to it that's very distinct. So who artistic value is a very subjective thing, I think, and a lot of people don't want to be making films that are considered high art. They want to entertain. And I think what's great, obviously the global industry does that, but I think what's great about South Africa is it's a space that's geared to that now as well. It used to be like there were very, very few films being made in South Africa. And even when I entered the industry, very few films were getting made. It was hard. Now the landscape's way more democratized. People are making films, like the funding models are actually working. The NFF is putting money to develop and produce projects. Netflix, Showmax, between them, like God bless them, SABC is trying. Everybody's trying to create content. There is a flood, there's a boom. There's South African films. When cinemas were running, South African films were releasing almost any week, every week, whereas before it was really hard to get those things made. Festivals, every film festival is running South African films. Now, be they splashy, like splatterfest genre films, or be they high art, like This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection, or whatever it might be, you know? So what's exciting is that we've become enough in industry that the space exists for you to make whatever the hell kind of film you want to make.
And that, yes, that's such an exciting thing to say to third years about to enter the industry. It's like,
yeah,
you know, you really can whatever you want to make. And if you happen to hit that right connection of, I mean, I think it's also important to hear Sean talking about, you know, they had a lawyer in their team right from the beginning. And you know, like find a couple of people who don't do exactly what you do to be part of your team, like people who are better at finances than you are, you know.
Yeah.
I'm in the fortunate position that my sister is a really good accountant, and she's kind of starting to specialize in being an accountant specifically for creative people, largely because of my own network of extended friends and stuff. But she's really good at it, and we even got her to like speak to the honors group this year. And you know, so but like that's not a person that I would have imagined. I mean, Shane, she's my sister, but I just mean that I would have imagined would be part of my working world going forward as an artist, you know. So that kind of thing is important. Magalela, just to make space for you to drop your question.
Are there questions flying in?
Thanks, Yaku. How are you?
Sorry?
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Makalela, I'm the guy that put up the shady producers question.
Okay.
Yeah. So I teach at Open Window, and the biggest question I get is like, why aren't you making stuff? And I keep telling the kids that it's fucking hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so I teach just for, you know, so I can get a salary. But yeah, I'm trying to make stuff, and I have like 3 little things. Not necessarily questions, but it's just stuff that you've been saying. The first being, school won't teach you everything, right?
Yeah.
I hope everyone's listening.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right about that. It was.
Yeah. You learn a lot of stuff like on the go, like on set. I think I mentioned earlier, I was like, I went to go hide in the car because.
Oh, it was you who went to go hide in the car. Yeah. You know, I think the things that you're learning, you don't even realize you're really learning. So it's the same with the, you know, like education as a whole. Is you learn subjects, you are taught things, you are taught specifics or how to do things, but it's the experiential learning, it's the things you don't realize you're learning day in and day out. And it's often it's interactions, it's people management, it's how to work with actors. You know, how do I resolve a situation with a difficult actor? That's not something somebody can teach you, but you learn that by virtue of doing. And I think one of the biggest learnings you get, I mean, maybe it's not learning, but it's working with people. It's building those relationships and learning how to forge relationships. And those are the things that carry out in the industry. So especially with film school, I say you've got to leave with sort of 2 things. One is a portfolio of projects you want to show people. And I think a lot of, sorry, say that again.
The other is contacts.
Yeah, there's contacts and relationships. Yeah, for sure. Those are the 2 things. I think, you know, because when I was at UCT, it was in the very early stage of their sort of film department, and a lot of the time the work is geared for marks. You know, you're doing assignments, you're writing this short script, you're making this short film, and then you do like your senior research project, whatever it is, at the end of the year. And so people are doing it, and it's a space. I think film schools should be, or film projects within schools should be, a chance to like try things out. You'll never get a chance to try again, because unless, you know, self-funding and you want to make a mistake. But if you're trying to learn and try new techniques or try narrative ideas or things, it's the place to do that. But it's also the place to put together a reel of work that you want to announce yourself into the industry with. You know, that's what you're doing with your school films. Is you've been given resources to realize visions in a way that's not going to happen when you graduate and you're out and you've got to fend for yourself and you don't have access to equipment or whatever those things you are. So use the chance to make something that's going to announce you. You know, get out there with your calling card and let that be the first thing that comes along. And then when you get out, there are resources. You know, put a band together, start a little company just so you have it. You have a little company, or you can start applying to the NFF for development funding on a short film. They have money. They give the money to projects. They don't have agendas or criteria in terms of contents and stories. They evaluate every project that comes in according to its merits, according to the dedication of the team. What have they really put into this? Like, how much development have they put into it? How convincing is the application package? You know, and I think there's a misperception that the NFF is this big faceless entity that has a little bit of money but doesn't really give it to anybody, and like that's literally not true. And we've gone from, in the beginning, putting in some mediocre applications and getting rejected, to putting in good applications and getting approved. And the NFF has funded everything from Five Fingers to development on a TV series that we're working on now, to sending us to festivals for Apocalypse Now and for Sweetheart. Back in the beginning, they funded the Schnitt Short Film Festival that I ran for 10 years. They funded 5 out of those 10 years. So they exist to put money into places where there's value, and the only criteria to that value is what's the quality of the application. It's got zero to do with the quality of the applicant, which is a misconception. Like, I think a lot of people go, oh, they don't fund white filmmakers, or oh, they don't fund rural filmmakers. Like, none of that's true. They put money into projects where the applications are good and solid. And that doesn't mean you'll be approved the first time round, but there's also learning that comes out of that, you know. So if you're looking for a vehicle to start making stuff, and the first barrier to entry is funding, start there. There's money available up to 250,000 Rand for a short film, you know, and they fund development and production of shorts. So you can go to them and get 100,000 Rand for developing a short film in the first place. It's not easy money, because you have to work for it. You have to put the time and effort into the applications, but the resources do exist to enable people to get out there and make their marks. And then once you have that, once you've made that film, once you've developed that project, you put a really great treatment together, you have a great script you've been working on, that's when you go to markets and you start trying to meet people and network and make those connections, and play the long game, and expect it not to be overnight, but put effort and energy into every single one of those potential relationships, because you don't know which is going to be the one that's gonna come back and go, bam, like, let's work together, let's make this thing happen.
Yeah, that's super cool. I hope Marco and Thorn and Skark are listening, but because it's what I've been talking about in class. It's like, you just make stuff, guys.
Yeah,
just make stuff.
Yeah, it's the truth, you know.
And Sean, you had said Stage 5 films. That's with Dylan, right?
Yeah, we work with them a lot. Yeah,
I have 2 scripts that are sitting on his desk.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm trying to get made.
Yeah.
But
that's cool. Yeah, but you know, so this is the thing as well, and I think I can talk about Dylan, because he's a very close collaborator. We're developing projects. We're doing Apocalypse Now together as a co-production, and they were involved in Five Fingers, and we've got a bunch of things we're doing. So they are a busy company, and they have a couple of projects in development, and some of them are very big and take a lot of time, but at the same time they also service, which is how they can afford to operate as a company. So right now they're in Mauritius servicing a job, which is, I mean, they've been there for months and they'll be there for months still to come. So, you know, the idea of like putting scripts on the desk of producers in this country is great because there are good producers who are geared to make things happen. But this was part of the journey towards us taking 5 fingers on ourselves and going, look, we have to, even if we don't really know what we're doing, we have to take the steps to learn, get the mentorship from the people where it counts. And we have a great lawyer who can help us on the legal side. We've been mentored by these producers who've explained a lot of the finances to us. We've teamed up with US producers to help us access an international marketplace. And then from the things that we knew we could handle from the very beginning, which is the creative side, the story development, the research, scouting, casting, like reaching out to industry and rallying industry around us, the NFVF, the DTI, those things are things we can learn to do and should learn to do ourselves. And so we started taking those steps so that by the time we got towards production, like we, you know, it's, I think just start where you can and then grow the skills as you need to until you are fully rounded, until your skill set is fully rounded. But the idea of waiting for a producer to make your script happen in South Africa is, it's just a very long game because every producer already has a ton of projects going on that they've been working on for years. You know what I mean? So it's like, what can you do now at this stage to take the first steps, even if it is through your own company, getting development finance out of the NFVF, because it also makes it a lot more appealing to a producer to go, listen, like, I'd love you to come on. Whoop. You still there? I'd love you to come on board this project. We're already NFVF funded and we have X and X and X attached. We've got this script that we've developed. We've had coverage. We've had feedback. It's gone through a development process and we think it's great. And we also have like whoever attached, like Pearl Tusi attached in the lead role or provisionally attached, or, you know, any of those sorts of things. So I don't think waiting is ever a good idea. You know, make stuff, develop stuff, take steps to get to move your projects forward.
Yeah,
but I think
for more context, I mean, even Magalela's story, his own story, you know, he was an open window student, I think 10, 12 years ago, and started his own company during that time with some fellow students, used that as a launching pad to make a docu about sneaker culture,
cool.
launched that into making some other docus. Like Magalela's underselling himself a little bit here, like he's won some SAFTAs and stuff, you know. But it, you know, and in a way, I mean, Magalela, I'm sad to hear you say that, like, you're teaching to get a salary. Like, you know, it's that same, and I know if we had a longer conversation, you would frame it a lot differently, but it's that thing that Tim Minchin says about teaching. He even says, like, teach, you know, like at some point in your life, give back to everyone, like even what Sean is doing now. And I'm sure you've had some other teaching context stuff, like where I met you was at the Durban Film Festival, where you were hosting a workshop, and I just loved the stuff you were saying. And that's when I, again, like afterwards just came and said to you, yo, I'm at this film school, like I think you should come over, you know, like
I don't think there's any, like, I half the people I know teach, you know, half the filmmakers who are making the films are teaching. So I don't think there's any people, like I say, it's not an industry that's geared towards people making a shit ton of money making their movies, you know, like people aren't earning on the back end of the profit. And a lot of the time people are making the decision to cut their salaries right down to put the money onto screen because what counts is like the calling card or so the decision we made to do that on 5 Fingers paid off because it's led to the careers we now have and the opportunities in the films that we have. It was like a calculated gamble that could have failed horribly if everybody had hated the movie, but luckily the people who loved the movie loved it enough to sort of give us opportunities that came about now. But I do guest classes or guest talks every now and again. I don't think I'm a great teacher, so I don't teach regularly in that sense. I think that's a skill set I don't have, but I can sit for 2 hours and just talk like through experiences, and hopefully there's value that comes out of that and the learning that comes out of that. So I think I think it's also a waiting game, you know, like it's the chance until that one project does kick off and then suddenly the game changes, you know. And I think that patience is also a big virtue in the game because nobody sees the 10 years of blood and sweat that go into overnight success, and there's no such thing as real overnight success, you know.
Yeah, I have a sneaky suspicion you're probably much better at teaching than what you think in your own mind, Sean.
Yeah, in a way, you know, like I can drop a truth bomb in the middle of a 15-minute story about like drinking Turkish coffee and somebody's like overly styled antique. But
No,
I think
I know what you mean. I think I know why you think you don't have the skill set, but you know, teaching, it's a thing. You grow into it as well.
Yeah.
Magalela, did you have another question? Because you mentioned you had 3 things, and I think you've covered like 1.5. Just want to make sure you hit all 3 points that you had in mind.
In the gap, I think Magalela, your mic is off. But in the quick gap, if you're not asking another question, I saw something about. Oh, no, you did.
Well, say what?
One thing I learned from Pluto, Yaku, is like always write. You might not be a writer, but you have an idea. Always keep that in your back pocket. You might come across shady producers, sure, but always have an idea in your back pocket.
Yeah. So, yeah. Because it was your point about shady producers, maybe I will talk about, because I think they definitely are shady producers out there, and I think
yes,
you've got to. I think there's a balance between being protective of your work and being open. You know, like a lot of people will go, well, I won't send you a script without you signing an NDA, which I think is not a great move, because it's immediately in an industry that's built on trust. It immediately sets up a barrier to trust. I think if you potentially don't trust a producer, don't send them your script. You know, if you're going to somebody who you don't think you trust in the first place, it's already not a great step towards a long-term relationship. And every relationship at film is a long-term relationship, because you're going to make a film together. It's going to take years, and then you're going to have to market it and distribute it, and then go out into the world and talk about each other and say nice things, you know. And so that's what I was saying. Again, even if you don't like somebody, make sure you respect them before you work with them. We've cut a lot of relationships short. We tend to be very protective on the paperwork side going into a relationship. Like, I would never ask somebody to sign an NDA before reading a script. But I don't, like, I'm not going to give you, like, I'm not going to sort of authorize you to come on board a project and start shopping it around or talking about it or associating yourself with it in any way, unless we have a very airtight contract or we have a long-term relationship and I know I can trust you. So we've had to cut short relationships a lot of the time, where we've gone in, we've done some very airtight contracting and realizing, oh, this is not good for us or for the project, and like, we're done here. And some of those have been with some shady dudes. I think trust your gut and don't approach the shady dudes in the first place. If you do decide to work with somebody, really make sure what's contracted is like solid. And that actually includes even with a lot of our internal projects at BFAT. We have contracts amongst ourselves and amongst the partners and anybody who's involved in the project, and it really pays off. With 5 fingers.
MOUs, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
MOUs.
MOUs or long form contracts. An MOU, a simple MOU is a good place to start. We've got simple MOUs, and a lot of the time you can sort of agree on what the basic points of the deal are and jot them down without having to get an expensive lawyer involved. I personally think it's always good to have a good mind, like a good legal mind, and if you need to. Our lawyer, who's Debbie Lazarus, is so pedantic that it makes me want to tear my own hair out sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, look, I just want to sign the thing. She's like, I'm not going to let you sign it until we've addressed the fine print or where the commas are. But it's really like invaluable. And I think, talking about the building the relationships and the trust again with 5 fingers, the guys at Game 7, Yaron Schwartzman and Asghar Hussain, our 2 American co-producers. We spent months putting that co-production agreement together between ourselves and them. And because there's no treaty, it's not like an official co-production between South Africa and the US like you might have between a German and South African project and companies. It's just a straight company co-production. We could do it without having to satisfy any like legal government loopholes. But we spent months putting together a very long contract, which was very specific about every aspect of fundraising, credit, who gets what, who does what we can expect in turn, like in relation to work and whatnot put into the project, who owns the rights, who owns potential remakes, who owns all of that sort of stuff. So we negotiated the shit out of that contract. Once it was signed, because we learned so much about each other and we really built so much of a trust relationship through the process of finding the compromises through the negotiation, we put it in a drawer and probably haven't looked at it ever again. And that's now 10 years ago, that relationship. And we made the film and we went through the trenches and we've sold it and it's distributing and it's going around the world, and we've never fought about money, credit, blah, 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 any of that sort of stuff, because it just luckily turned out to be a really great relationship. We haven't needed to go back to the contract. Same time, same project, many people have come and gone, many potential co-producers were like, I can find some money for you. They've come on board, failed dismally to do anything of value and been cut out without having to give up any piece of the pie or any sort of ownership or credit. There was one producer, I mean, we made the same mistake twice. It was really dumb to go back to the same guy. He is a guy who I'd consider to be a shady producer. He's produced a couple of South African films. Generally not a very pleasant dude to be around, but the first time, I think he was someone we'd known roundabout, and someone we'd met at festivals and met through like these networking events and stuff, like you know, like by the by, we've been on some of those international missions together, and so then invariably you strike up conversations, and he was like, oh, you know, like maybe I can do something with the project, why don't you come in and see me? This was already a few years in, so we tried a lot of different avenues trying to raise money, and we had some money, we didn't have enough money. We went into his office and he was like, okay, great, thanks for coming in. So we're like, cool, well, like, thanks for taking this meeting. Let's look, like, we'd love to hear about some of your ideas. And he was like, what? Well, we'd love to hear about some of your ideas for financing, because, you know, like we've been doing this for a long time and we've tried a lot of avenues, but if you have new ideas, yeah, we'd love to hear them. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. Look at all my posters on the wall. Don't you know how many films I've produced? I was like, literally, like, he was coked up and it was like, it was the weirdest meeting I've ever taken, because he just does, like, I don't know, we just basically were like, okay, I see, obviously, like, you're a dick. So we made a terrible mistake coming here. He's like, basically, he was like, how dare you ask me what I want to bring to the table before you just give me your project? And we're like, okay, peace, like, have a nice life. Anyway, fast forward 4 years later, we really, projects falling apart. And this is, you know, like, whoever asked the question, did you ever, like, lose the will to live? Like, you don't so much lose the will to live, but you do start making kind of not that great decisions. And so he sort of popped up again, or somebody persuaded us to go and see him again, because they're like, I really think he's like, he might be able to bring some value, and I think he like feels bad about the first time. So we went to see him again, and he was very nice, like very nice. So we had a very pleasant couple of conversations. Eventually decided, okay, cool, you know, like, he's put some good ideas out. He's talked about some potential connections and how much money he can possibly bring into the project. And so we sign again a very like specific MOU about what he's allowed to do and what he can expect to do for the project as we go ahead. And it becomes immediately apparent like he's not going to do any of the things that he said he was going to do. And we're like, okay. And then we'd applied, even though we shot the film in the Eastern Cape, there was a point we were thinking about possibly shooting in KZN, like moving the project to KZN so we could access some money from the KZN Film Commission. And so we literally prepared the whole submission. Like, I think it's these applications, like I say, with the NFF, a really thick application. And he was like, he just basically was doing nothing. And we were also on location and going back and forth and researching. He was like, oh, well, you know what, just let me submit this for you. And I go, okay, cool. Well, here's all the documents. Like, you literally just need to scan them and send them, or I can't even remember what it was. For some reason, it was a physical thing that we were submitting. And anyway, we do, we don't think about it. And eventually, like, the word comes back, we've been approved for this money by the KZN Film Commission. We're like, great. And we look at the approval letter, and it's in his name and his company. And so what he's basically done is he's changed all of our company details in the application. He's used all the company documents to put his own company, his own name on these documents, the KZN Film Commission. We were like, what? Like, why would you do that? Okay, immediate like red flag, show of terrible bad faith. We're like, fine. We'd like, at least it means the money is potentially committed. So how are we going to do this? And, you know, he had some terrible ideas of how we could move them. We're like, okay, we're going to have to really find a solution to see if this is going to work or not. But the warning lights are already going off. And then the the final nail in the coffin came when he sent a mail and said, well, I've signed the contract with the KZN Film Commission. At which point we would go, okay, like there are 4 producers on the project, myself and Michael, Asger and Yaron. You are a potential co-producer on the project if this money works out. In what world, and I said this very diplomatically, even though I was like literally smashing the chairs, like why do you think it would be okay to sign a contract on behalf of a project that you're not actually a leading producer on? To which his response was basically, fuck off, like verbatim. So which the response was, go fuck yourself, and we triggered the clause and kicked them off the project. Stories from behind the scenes.
Sure. That was a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's
that is common. Basically protect yourself, I think, but also know who you're going to business with in the first place. So there's some people who I think I wouldn't approach anymore. And there are many people I would, because they're really like a shit ton of really great producers here. And I think in general, the industry is geared to find interesting projects and voices, new young voices. I said that in a graduation speech, and it's true. Like the opportunities are not overflowing, but they are abundant to a point, definitely compared to how things were when we were sort of emerging into the industry. And I would say maybe if you're a director, try and cut a really good reel and maybe get in on some projects as either a second unit or behind the scenes, or maybe even try and get some episodes of a series that somebody else is producing as a path, rather than trying to get your own stuff off the ground straight away. But at the same time, if you're developing, you've got great scripts and you're getting to those producers, I think definitely do it. But at the same time, try and put as much in as you can and bring as much value as you can to the table, because like everybody is busy and everybody has projects. And the last thing you want is to be one of 10 projects that somebody is producing that they're only able to put like X amount of energy into, not out of desire, but just literally bandwidth, and going like, I literally can't push 10 projects ahead at the same time. You've got to focus on what's moving when it's moving.
That was probably a good way to wrap it all up, eh?
Oh yeah, I'm looking at these questions that you sent, and I forgot to address any of them. What type of narratives? I think we talked about what type of narratives. I think it's a real open space. I think there is a tendency for a little bit of more commercial and more audience-friendly stuff. On the theatrical side, people are really hoping for projects that can break out and travel and or recoup, as in make their money back. But then your Netflixes are looking for real like wide appeal. Is there a future for animated films? There is. Animation is just really expensive. So it's a barrier to entry, but Netflix is commissioning animated series. There actually is quite a robust animated industry in South Africa. Triggerfish are doing amazing things. There are a couple of other companies doing amazing things. A lot of it is on the service side. So working with, I think the BBC works with Triggerfish and a couple other companies here, where they're adapting folk tales and books and stuff into animated content. But for local, it's really expensive. And it's just so hard to compete on an international level, because the resources we have is going to mean we're not making like Pixar styled stuff. Bradley, producers having connections. I think we've talked about how to make those producers connections and whatnot. Do we need our own filmmaking equipment? It depends what you're doing. That's so hard to answer. Sure, if you want to buy a bit of equipment to make like corporate videos or shoot your own shorts, but generally I think, I'm assuming it's the same in Cape Town, but gear houses are really accommodating for up and coming filmmakers and students and people trying to carve voices. So a lot of the time they'll give you access to good gear for very little money relative to your budget. Film grants, NGO sponsorships, again, like into markets and forums. Do Berlin Talent Campus and that sort of thing, because all those markets and funds are there, and it's a way to meet people. Keep an eye out for calls, apply to the NFEF, NGOs and that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't know, it depends what. It really depends. It's quite a general question, but I think you're asking, how do you get some grant money or just development money? NFEF is a great place to start. And yeah, then just be present. Go to industry events, meet people, like introduce yourself as an up and coming filmmaker. People respond well to that. People respond better to, I'm an up and coming filmmaker, I'm really like aspiring to do this and this and this, than, hey yo, I'm gonna change the industry. Like feel it out.
That's very true. All right, I did allow the opportunity for some last minute questions to come through, but I see there aren't any new ones in the last couple of minutes.
Cool.
I think you've done a couple of good wrap-ups, actually. And I do think in the 2 hours, there's a ton of content here. I'm actually going to show this to my second years as well, because we've been speaking about South African cinema this term.
Cool.
This is going to be useful.
Yeah, man, it's an exciting time, and there's great stuff being made. And take this opportunity to stop my dog from eating whoever's at the door. And
yeah, isn't that a sign?
Yeah, he's gonna start chewing me because he wants to go walk. But yeah, this has been great. Good luck. Looking forward to seeing your stuff. Thanks, Yaku.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
All right, have a good one.
Cool, you too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Okay.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, everyone who is still here from Open Window.
Peace, Yaku.
Peace out, Magalela.
Good show.
That was fun. Yeah, that was really cool.